And it talks about delivering feedback. Are you actually being heard? And so it starts with on the left, it's what we say to dogs, and it's basically the owner yelling at the dog, and all the dog hears is its name. That's the only thing it hears. The rest of it is like, I don't hear anything you're saying. And a lot of the times when we're giving feedback, people only hear what they want to hear, right? And the more we do that peanut butter spread and the more we sugarcoat things, the more they only hear the positives. The more they're like, I think I'm doing a great job. He's really happy with the stuff I delivered and everything's good. And you only hear what you want to hear. And then conversely, the cat, for anybody who's a cat owner, it's her yelling at the cat, and the cat's just like, what? No, I'm good. That can be when people go into defense mode, right? When people go into defense mode, you really literally hear nothing that's coming out of that person's mouth because you start to tell a story. So in your head, you start to be like, well, it's all your fault because you never give me anything. And what am I supposed to do when I don't even have the information on time, right? And you start to like build a story and stop listening. So what we really want to focus in when we have to give some of that critical feedback is how can we get heard and make sure that the person understands the topic that we're really focusing on. And so I use this feedback framework called Spark. And we're going to dig into each of these. And this is where I say it gets really heavy, really deep. Just bear with me. You will get a handout that has the cheat sheet for all of these areas, but we're going to talk about them. None of these are mind-blowing, like I would have never thought about that. That's amazing. But the structure, and when we think through the structure, and when you get the handout and you think through that structure, what it does is helps us pause. It helps us slow down and focus on what we actually want to deliver. And as you guys know, sometimes when all of a sudden you have to give feedback right away and you haven't prepared, that you just kind of just like blah, 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 right? And it's like and you just keep throwing things out, hoping that something sticks, and then all of a sudden they smile and say thank you, right? And you're waiting for that emotion, but in the meanwhile, all they're hearing is everything they've ever done wrong ever in history of life. And you both walk out with no productivity. So this helps us be like, what do I want to make sure lands? And so it's survey the situation, plan for the discussion, activate the discussion, reflect on the discussion, and then do check-ins. And as you'll see here, I use the word discussion instead of conversation because a discussion requires back and forth. A conversation can be a monologue. That is a conversation. A discussion has to have two sides. And it's really important that we find ways for them to respond and for us to respond to them. The other thing that's really important here is you'll see that there's prep and then there's the actual thing and then there's follow-up. This is kind of how you need to think about a lot of conversations you have in life is what do I need to be prepared to talk about? Let's have it. And what do I need to do as a result? So starting with survey the situation. This is on your own. This is before you start talking to anybody. And there's kind of three areas to get your head around. One is what is the point? This is not, I want to go tell this person that they suck and they need to fix themselves, or that they're not doing it the way I want to do it and that's wrong and they have to do it better. This is identify one issue to talk about, one topic. Even if there's three things wrong, what's the one you're going to talk about in this conversation? And I always say start with the the biggest fruit. Like if I solve this, the other two may fall in line. Like I may solve one of the problems. Don't start with the smallest, littlest, nitpickiest thing. What's the one conversation that's going to have the biggest impact? Even if there's 30 things that are wrong, what's the one conversation, the one topic? And these topics fall into 4 different groups. All things that you need to give feedback in fall into one of 4 areas. Is it the content? So content would be like they're not having the right information. They're having errors in their work. They're the presentation's sloppy, that's not in the right format. It's that they skip or that they don't include information, right? It's just true what's in the thing that they're delivering, the content. So you need to help them fix what they're delivering. The second is process. This is more the example that we had from the other group is you need to QC your own work and you need to take time to QC your work because I don't want to have to QC all errors, right? There shouldn't be this many errors in the work I'm getting. So what's the person isn't following the right process to get the work to you. It's not that the work is, crappily done. It's that they're not QCing, which is a step in the process. So what's going on? Why are they not following the process? Pattern, once is a mistake. We all get mistakes. 2 times is an error, and we should be aware of the error. 3 times is a pattern, and that needs to be fixed. So this is very much like, you all know this. You've messed up, and somebody was like, oh, that's the wrong equation, and you're like, crap. Like, yep, it is. Okay, you're good. You do not need them to pull you into a half an hour conversation to talk about why the equation was incorrect. You're like, I made a mistake. I got it. I'm good. I'll fix it. Right? Second time it happens, that's an error. And you're like, oh God, I know you told me. And this is where you're like, I know you told me last time and I just forgot to check it. I will make sure that I check it going forward. Right? And you're like, okay, you know it's wrong. You got it. We're good. Third time's a pattern. They're not doing something. And we need to start nipping this in the bud. We need to fix how they're doing things. The last one is a relationship. So this is somebody feels this way, or people are working in the incorrect way, or there's strife or something with the way people are working and communicating. I guarantee you everything you need to talk to a person about falls into one of those 4 buckets. What we end up doing is presenting information in all of them. And we make everything seem like it's all of it. And so they're like, oh, you made an error. So what are you doing in the process? And I feel like this is the 4th time that you've done this. And it's really starting to make me mad. And I think that's, working on our relationship. They're not hearing all of that. They will pick one thing to hear, and it may not be the one you want them to. So what exactly do you want changed, modified, or stopped? That's what is the point. Then going into a little bit of emotional intelligence is, where are they? What is their emotional mindset? Is it crunch time? And maybe this isn't the best time to pull them aside and tell them that they need to do more. Like maybe it's like it can wait a week. We'll get back to it in 4 days. How do they typically receive feedback? Some people are really good at, yeah, I got it. And it fixed, no problem. Don't even need an explanation. They're like, don't do that again. You're like, got it. Off they go. Some people need to be told 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 1,000 times, and it still just doesn't seem to change. And then they get defensive and they fight back with you about everything. And it's never their fault and all those things. So be prepared. Think about how they typically are. And then how much time or emphasis does this need? Is this a quick 3-minute hall conversation, or is this a half an hour sit down? We need to put together a plan. And then also, where are they coming from? What could their best intention be? So they keep making this error. And you're like, God, they're stupid. They just cannot seem to freaking figure this out. No, maybe they have too much on their plate. And thinking through where might they be coming from, it also helps you prep how they might respond. It's crunch time, and I have told this junior analyst to run like mad, and I keep getting stuff with errors. He's probably overwhelmed, right? So I want to approach the conversation in a way that resonates with him. And then finally, where are you? What are your emotions? Does this really piss you off and you're just irritated to the point where conversation won't be helpful because you're just going to scream and yell? We're going to talk a lot about stories today. So what story are you building in your head? The victim is, this is being done to me. I am innocent. I've done everything that I possibly could have. It's not my fault. This is impossible. There's no way anybody should expect me to be able to do this, right? You're building the story that this is being done to you. The opposite of that is they are doing it, and that is creating the villain. Well, they always want me to do this, and it's so time consuming, or they always think of themselves first, and they never leave time for anybody else to get the work done, or they're so unreasonable, right? The minute you start putting labels and using always, never, consistent, constantly, right, forever, anytime you start using those, you're probably creating a victim. And then helpless is, well, there's nothing I can do about it. This is impossible. There's nothing I can do to change it. Where you are is going to derive how they respond. And if you start playing these stories in your head, your presentation to them and conversation with them will build those characters and will present those characters. So we want to step out of that and start to think about, what are the facts versus my assumptions? What can you control? You can control how you deliver the message. You can control the environment in which you deliver the message, and you can control your emotions. That's it. You cannot control how they feel. How they feel is not something you can tell them. You cannot control how they respond. You cannot control if they build a story. What you can control are the only things you can control. And so really being clear on what your intention is and being as succinct as possible to avoid things spiraling out of control. Make sense? Questions? I know, again, I'm going to keep saying it's a lot. Okay. Let me know if you have questions. All right. Moving on to plan for discussion. So we've done a mental check of this is what I really want to focus on. This is the key thing I want to change, modify, stop, or start. Okay. And they are probably overloaded. They're probably running on steam at this point. This is probably how they feel. I know they've got a lot going on. Okay. And I've just been frustrated and sort of short and snippy with them. I've been constantly saying they're trying to piss me off. I know they're not. And I'm going to try and be calm in this conversation. You're ready to go. Now you got to think about what you're going to say. So the content of the conversation is we're going to create a problem statement. We're going to work on that today. So I'll give you an example in a second. The biggest thing about the content is facts, data, and behaviors that you've observed. You want to remove labels, assumptions, and blame. So the more you can get factual, the more you can say, I have seen this behavior and I have seen people respond in this way, or I have heard that people take this way and I want to share that with you. Not emotions, facts, labels, blaming. The more you will get through to people and the more calm you can stay. So the other thing we talked about is this is a discussion. So how can I create dialogue? Avoid yes and no questions. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes. Probably not, but I'm going to say yes because I'm not going to say no. Get them open-ended questions. So what's resonating with what I'm saying with you? So how does this feedback make you feel? Or where do you see opportunities for improvement? Avoid the yes and no, really get them to talk and get that cycle to go to seem more like a discussion than feedback. So here's the problem statement. And I do want you guys to all write this down because we're going to come back to this.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
If you were delivering feedback and thinking about open-ended questions, could you also like ask a question around like, can you maybe help me understand what happened here, or can you help
So
me
yeah, and
understand?
we're going to get into that in the discussion, but yes. So I think when you're talking about questions is what are questions I can ask to get them to talk through any of it so you can say what's going on, um, you know, how can I help? Anything that's not a yes and no that just gets them talking. And so just write down options throughout. We'll talk a little bit about the framework of the conversation. And questions in all of them, because you don't want it to be like, here's all the things that are wrong, and here's all the things you need to fix, and here's how you're going to fix them. Okay, are you good? Like that's not a discussion. So here's what I'm seeing. What do you think's going on? Okay, what are our options for us to solve that and work together? What do you need from me? How can I support you? When should our next follow-up be? Right? Get them to be back and forth versus just listening like my puppy does. Okay. So the problem statement is we want to keep it succinct. So it's what is the observed behavior or action? This is facts only. I have seen you talk over other people in the meeting. I have heard feedback that that you are saying disrespectful things in the cafeteria, right? Whatever. What are the facts that you know? What is the impact it could have, even if it's just for you? I feel like this is disrespectful. Why are you concerned? So this could really hinder our ability to move you forward in your career. This could be seen by others as you not wanting to be here. Why are you concerned? And you can honestly say, why are you concerned? And you can say me. I am really concerned that this is going to hinder your ability to move forward. I am really concerned that unchecked, this behavior is going to become detrimental. What would you like to see? I'd like to see us find a way to do this. And how can I help you? So that's your problem statement. We're going to work on those in a second. So now we've figured out what we're going to say. We figured a little bit about how we're going to say it. And then we need to make sure we're emotionally prepared. So, what emotions might show up for you? Name them, right? So, we did this in the last session, and somebody was like, they're just constantly making errors, and it's like they're just not even paying attention. And you're like, okay, you feel like they're not listening to you. That's an emotion. That's not a behavior. You feel that. Check yourself on it. You cannot go into the conversation being like, you're disrespecting me and not listening to me. Because they're going to say, yes, I am, and no, no, I'm not, and yes, I am. Right? Like, so check your own emotions of how you're going to come in, describe them and plan, head them out, and show them. And then what emotions might show up for them. And this is back to building relationships with your colleagues so that you know if you're going to attack something on their performance, they're going to get defensive immediately. Be prepared for that, right? Be able to respond to that defensiveness in a positive and encouraging way. All right. We've surveyed our scenario. We know kind of what's going on and how we're going to manage our emotions, their emotions, and be best intention. We've identified what we're going to say and how we're going to manage ourselves and be prepared for their emotions. It's time to talk. First and foremost, ask for permission to provide feedback, but give an alternative time or situation. How many times have you been confronted with somebody saying, "Hey, can I give you feedback on that meeting we just had?" And you're like, sure. I know it just went shitty and I'm in a really bad place in my head and I'm probably not going to listen to a word you're telling me because I'm already not enough at myself. But yeah, what do you think? Right? Like our minds are not in the right space. But very rarely do we give people an alternative. So you feel like you have to say yes. So the right way to ask somebody if they're ready for some critical feedback is, hey, I have some feedback on that meeting we just had. Would you want to meet now or would later this afternoon be better? Right? Give them an option to say, you know what, later this afternoon is probably better. Um, connect for okay, so that you figured out. And they've said, yeah, no, I'm ready. Yeah, no, it's fine. Okay, connect first. Check in. How do you think that went? Or how you doing? Or I've seen that you've been um struggling with this lately. How is it? What's going on? Right? Give them a chance to connect with you as a human before you start drilling down on what's wrong with them. And then begin with what is working. So open on a positive. This is not sugarcoating. This is really stating a fact of what has worked and why, and it sets the stage for why what you're about to say is out of ordinary. So an example is, I know you prepared a ton for this presentation and you just said you didn't feel like it went well. You've done this great before. Like and then you can kind of go into what's going on. You can say, I know that you've been great at presentations and you didn't like that one. I feel like that's, really out of character. You're great at those presentations. Just
So,
go ahead.
sorry. So
No,
opening on a positive could simply be, I know you all prepared a lot for this and put a lot of work into this. I noticed that it didn't go as well as it did last time. Is that like, would that be considered positive?
yeah, and it's saying like I mean, one is do they are when you check in, you're like, hey, how's it going? How do you think it went? Right? And they're like, I blew it. Use the facts that you're given to make it not sound like you're blowing smoke up their butts, right? So if they're like, oh, I think it went great, I really killed it, and you're like, yeah, I think it went great too, but I'm going to tell you everything that just went wrong with it, right? Like that's not helpful. So if they're like, I think it went great, be like, yeah, you really are a strong presenter. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the responses I was seeing in the room this time, right? So you could say like you are a strong presenter, you are good at this, you did have a lot of good points. You had a lot of great points in that presentation. I'm not sure all of them stuck. Can we talk about how we can, work on that? Another thing too is if it's a strong performer, is you can really lean in on, listen, you're one of our top performers, and you know you're my go-to person, or you know you're one of our go-to people. I want to have a conversation about something that's not really landing effectively. Because then they don't feel like you're just berating them. And that there's hope for them to come back up into a good light. Um, State the intention for the feedback. So again, you can say, you're one of our top performers and you've always delivered on time. And I noticed that this last report came in 2 days late, and I want to help understand what we can do to make sure that that doesn't happen again to help you, meet your goals like you always set out for yourself, right? Like I feel like there's something in your way that might be able to remove, or um, the errors, or some of the stuff I'm seeing makes me worry about how you're doing, right? So why are you giving this feedback? What is the intention? I want to help you here. I know this might be hard to hear, but I really want to help you grow. What's your true intention? Um, then you give your problem statement. We're going to practice those in a second. Then you let them respond. You give a problem statement, and then you stop talking and let them respond.
What's
Listen with
considered
empathy.
a problem statement?
What was that?
What's considered a problem statement?
So I'll give you one right now. So it says, during our last 3 meetings, I've noticed you've interrupted others while they were speaking. This makes it harder for others to contribute and can slow down our progress as a team. I feel concerned because it's important that everyone feels heard and valued. In the future, it would be helpful if we waited for others to finish speaking before jumping in. How can we make sure everyone has the opportunity to share their thoughts? You said the specific behavior that you've seen. You said why you're concerned about it. You've said why it would be beneficial, like what we need to see. And then you talk about how can I support you? And so this goes into a little bit of if we give the problem statement, then let them respond, right? And listen with empathy with the goal to understand their view. It is highly likely the younger of the person or less experienced work-wise, the more defensive they are going to be or the more agnostic they are going to be. They will either be like, no, I didn't do that, or no, I did. I did put the thing in there, or I didn't. No, that's not how I did it, right? Or, okay, uh-huh, okay, sure, yeah, right? So they're going to take likely one of those two. They're either going to defend or deny it, or they're going to go into, sure, yeah, sounds great. Neither one of those is really a conversation. So you want to go back to those questions you wrote down. How do you get them to start having a dialogue with you? And so letting them respond, see how they're emotionally responding, and listen and find out where they're coming from. And then ask for their ideas for how do we move forward, and be open to their solutions. You may already have in your head, so therefore you need to do this. But if their answer to your problem statement is this is going on over here, and and you're like, oh, well, I can see where my solution for you to just do the process this way doesn't make sense because you don't understand the process. So we need to back up. And I need to help you with understanding that versus telling you to follow the process. So your solution that you have in your head may change based on how their feedback is. And then ask how you can support. What do they need from you? Again, none of these are earth-shattering, mind-blowing, like, oh yeah, I've never done that type of things. But when we slow down and think about the process and prepare for that, and the more you practice it, the more giving someone really difficult things to hear doesn't have to be a battle. It doesn't have to make you anxious. It doesn't have to make them anxious. Questions on the dialogue.
I have a question. So, what if you're in a situation where you have you supported them and got them to a like you've done everything to support them and after a certain point like it's up to them to deliver what they have to deliver or whatever it is. Um, what do they need from you? Like, what if you've already done everything that you could, but then they still didn't, Like, how do you still ask them, like, how
Yes,
can
so
I better support you, even though, like, I'm not going to do my job. I'm not going to do your job. Do you know what I'm trying to
Yeah, yeah,
say?
yeah. So here's the thing. Remember, if the first conversation is on content, right? So the first conversation is you need to change, you need to fix this in your work. Okay. And they don't do it. And you're like, how can I help you? And they're like, oh, it'd be great for you to, walk me through a model. And you're like, okay, I walk through the model. And then like, do you feel good about it? Yeah, I feel good about it. And you write. And then it happens again. And you're like, so I noticed that this happened. Like we walked through it. What else can I do to help you, remedy this? Third time it's a pattern. You're no longer talking about the content. You're now talking about the pattern. So we've worked through this a couple of times and I keep providing guidance and tutoring for you, but I'm not seeing a change in behavior. So we need to approach this differently. What do you need to change, to impact, to influence, to make this change? No longer what do I need to do to help you with the content? Now, what do you need to implement this change? Because you're now talking about the pattern, not the content. And I will tell you, if you've had the same conversation 3 times, you are now in a pattern or a relationship issue, not a content issue. They either don't give a crap what you think and don't want to listen to you for some reason, or they are doing something, some behavioral pattern that they're not implementing it. They're choosing not to. So it's no longer content. That's not the conversation anymore. Okay? Other questions?
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. When you're done with you, that you've had feedback, you've got to this great, and you're like both like, woo, right? Don't stop the conversation. Don't walk away and just be like, yeah, we're good. Because if you ever play the game of telephone, it really only takes 2 people to screw up a message. So end the conversation with, I feel really good about this, or sounds like we've got a plan. Can you, summarize back to me what, you heard? Or what things you want to focus on, right? Have them commit to the next steps. Hear it from them to make sure they're aligned with what you're thinking. And this is a lot of sometimes we think we're really clear and we ramble on and we sugarcoat and we peanut butter spread and we do all these things and they come back and be like, so I need to be on time to meetings more. And you're like, no, no, I need you to pay attention in the meetings, right? Like, I don't care. Like, you need to get there, but you need to actually like participate. So, by us dragging out the things, they may have heard a totally different issue. So, aligning at the end, having them commit to what they're doing, you summarizing, okay, sounds great. I think this is a good plan. I will follow up with you next Tuesday or in our next one-on-one, we're going to discuss those steps, whatever. Clarify what you'll be expecting to see and by when. And so back to that problem where you're talking over people is saying, I really appreciate your openness to this. I'd love for the next team meeting that we have to see you allowing people to finish their statements before jumping in. And then do we need to check in? Do we need to have a deeper conversation? This is assuming everything goes according to plan, which nothing ever does in life. And so when you give them feedback and they just start bawling and their mom's sick and the dog has appendicitis and the car broke down and you're just like, whoa, like we're just talking about being on time to meetings, but okay, like whoa. Being like, you know what, let's just pause this and come back to it. Sounds like there's a lot going on right now. How about we schedule something next Monday to talk about the meeting issues. Does that sound good? And then go schedule it, right? If they're not listening, they're not listening. Don't bother having the conversation. And then ask for their feedback before you leave. Say, I really got a lot out of this conversation. I think we're in a good spot. How do you feel the conversation went? What was helpful? Because you want to do that again next time, right? Right. Do we have Danny back? Okay. I just want to make sure I'm not ignoring him. All right. So you've discussed it. You're all off you go. Everything's good. Now what? The last one is check in. If you said, let's schedule a follow up, schedule the follow up right after the conversation. I know all of us, and if you say you're going to do it, and then somebody like something happens, and then all of a sudden their behavior changes, you're like, man, like never mind. We want to schedule that meeting if we said we would, so that we can give them the feedback they need. Second is reward positive behavior. I joke, we are all like puppies, we truly are. And I do not want to yell at my dog and expect him to change that behavior. I want to reward him for the behavior I want to see. So if in the next meeting this person decided to stay quiet, let everybody finish, and then say, is it okay if I jump in here? After that meeting, be like, nailed it, dude. Killed it. Like, so proud. Like, really, really great way to stay conscious in that meeting. I really appreciate it. You did awesome. Right? Because you want to reward the behavior you want to see. Not acknowledge improvements along the way. Say thank you. Thanks for, putting in the extra effort there. I really appreciate that. Um, but don't let it go too long with no improvement because now you may need to circle back on again. It may be the process, it may be the relationship, it may be a pattern. If you let it go, it might turn into a different conversation. Okay?